Hello, everyone, and welcome to the penultimate episode of my top 150 favorite novels, which we are going to try and continue to go through at a similar pace, but I'm going to have more and more to say for each novel as I keep liking them more and more. This version these are getting high up there. You're gonna see the amount of books for each rating get lower and lower as we get closer to 10. So, coming in at number 50. Still at a 9.3 out of 10, is Cold Days by Jim Butcher, which is my fourth favorite novel in the Dresden Files, which is one of my favorite series of all time. When I first read this, I actually liked it even more than Skin Game. I now do like Skin Game even more than this, but Cold Days definitely is just wins in terms of peak insanity. Harry is such a good protagonist. He's literally my second favorite character in fiction. This has, I think, the best two world building reveals in the entire series, and they're like 100 pages apart. It's wild. It recontextualizes a bunch of the series. It's so good, and it is the beginning of my second favorite character in the series. It has an exponential growth in genius in her character writing, and this is where the exponential growth starts to poke up. So yeah, Cold Days. Next up, Towers of Midnight by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. This is the second last Wheel of Time book. This one I feel like kind of gets forgotten about. And I'm kind of like, every once in a while, I'll see where I have it, and I'm like, that's kind of weird that it's that high. It doesn't feel like, among the fandom, it's one of the most iconic ones. And then I look at, what happens in this novel, and I'm like, holy crap. The amount of stuff that happens in this novel is crazy. It's got, 12 of completely insane moments. It's got, I obviously can't talk about the details that much, but every time I start to doubt how high this should be, I look at what happens and I'm like, wait, is it too low? I'm really interested eventually when I reread all of Wheel of Time to get to Towers of Midnight and see what I think. Number 48, we have Midnight Tides by Steven Erikson. This is still not the last time you will hear the name Steven Erikson on this list. This is my second favorite novel by Steven Erikson. I think it's probably the tightest of the Malazan book. It introduces the person who I think is my favorite character. I also think it has my single favorite chapter in the entirety of Malazan Book of the Fallen, which you'd think would be some crazy epic thing. It's actually two people talking in a tent. It has, I think, my favorite antagonist in the entire series. It's also, I think, has a good case for being the funniest book in the entire series. So Midnight Tides, my beloved. It might end up, that's when it might go up on reread. 47, A Memory of Light. Wow, this is a really Wheel of Time heavy section of this. Anyway, the next book is Wheel of Time as well. Memory of Light, obviously the final book in the Wheel of Time that has some of the most batshit, completely insane stuff that you will find in any fantasy novel, and is another one of the best endings to a fantasy series. There's nothing hits like getting to the end of a really long fantasy series. Trilogies are great, standalones are great, duologies are great, but there is just no feeling like getting to the end of a series that you've been reading for at least 10 books and finishing it and being like, I have completed the Wheel of Time. I have completed Malazan Book of the Fallen. I have completed the Realm of the Elderlings. And some even trick you because they're short enough that they could easily be quartets, but still, when I finished The Black Company, I was like, I have completed The Black Company. Speaking of Wheel of Time, Lord of Chaos by Robert Jordan. This is my second favorite Wheel of Time novel. A lot of people claim that it's actually just the ending is insane and the rest of the novel isn't as good, but I can go back on Discord and find my reactions, and this was my favorite Wheel of Time book at the time before it's actually my third favorite. Not my second favorite, I forgot about one. Whatever, we'll get to that later. Will we get to that in this episode? No, next episode. Is that true? Did I just... No, it's this. We'll get to that shortly. In 11 books. But this was my favorite of the first 6, even before the ending. And then it does have in contention for the single best chapter in the entirety of the Wheel of Time as its last chapter. I don't play it anymore, but remember when I had the intro and there was the background intro music? I stole that from a YouTube video called Lord of Chaos Painting, which is the background music as it shows the painting of, not this cover is terrible, but of the cover of these editions being done with that music playing in the background. It's so sick. It begins like it introduces my favorite element of the entire series, which is an aspect of Rand's character that is the reason Wheel of Time is one of my favorite characters in terms of like everything. So that's what gets it. That's the other thing that gets it this high. All right, moving on. You're gonna start to see a concentration of a few authors coming up more and more. This next one is the first novel that gets a 9. Oh no, this is the last 9.3 out of 10, and it is Kingdoms of Death by Christopher Rocchio, which is my third favorite novel in the Sun Eater saga. Is it a saga? This has one of the craziest, ballsiest final acts, climaxes, and falling actions to any novel that I have ever read, full stop. The writing is fantastic. Hadrian is such an interesting character, and we also get to learn a lot more about the Cielsen. I definitely understand why one would like this Sun Eater book less due to some of the content. I could see it being repetitive. I think I like the first 80% less than I like the first 80% of Howling Dark. But, like, everything from, like, chapter 40 on, like, this was one of those, I read this, it was the arc. And at the time, it was Daw, and Daw barely was giving out arcs, and the other people who got arcs weren't actually reading it, because one of it was, like, Petrick, who hadn't read the series yet. And, like, no one else had read it. If you looked on Goodreads, like, I was the only Goodreads review. The only other person who, like, knew what happened was Rocchio. And I remember I was at work the next day, and it was so upsetting that I couldn't talk about what had happened. Anyway, beating up by one spot, number 44, is the first 9.4 out of 10. There's going to be an author that you're going to see a higher and higher concentration of, and that is Forest Mage by Robin Hobb, the second book in the Soldier Sun trilogy. This is a book that I think has like a 3-point-something rating on Goodreads. It's one of the lowest rated books on Goodreads that I've read. It's wild. It's so good. 3.45. This is not my favorite book by Robin Hobb, obviously, because that's why it's 44 on this list. But if this is your favorite book by Robin Hobb, I see where you're coming from. It's one of the best plotted Robin Hobb books. It has, I think, like, there's some stuff people really find difficult to read. People definitely are blaming our protagonist, Nevers, for things outside of his control. And it's like, it's put him in such a social situation that it's almost like you feel the secondhand uncomfortableness and embarrassment. Even though, like, it's not his fault. Some of those rage-inducing scenes. But I think one of the reasons they hit the so hard is of how well and realistically and unflinchingly they're written. The character writing is brilliant because it's Robin Hobb. And then the entire way the plot comes together is extremely just, like, detail-oriented. And then it's such an impactful ending. Beating out by one spot, number 43 is Disquiet Gods by Christopher Rocchio. Also, I'd like to note Forest Mage is the first book on here that was one of my book of the years. It was my book of the year in 2023. It was my weakest book of the year since making the channel, but it was. Number 43 is Disquiet Gods by Christopher Rocchio, which is my second favorite book in the Sun Eater saga. This just kind of has all the best elements of the other Sun Eater books. I don't know why it's not thicker. I think it just has thin pages. So it just has a lot of the best elements from the other Sun Eater books. I think Hadrian has gone down such an interesting path and is so well written as, like, now a very old, like, eccentric at this point character. It also takes some serious risks, especially in the middle. It also has a crazy ending. I do prefer the climax of, like, Kingdoms of Death, but as a whole, I prefer Disquiet Gods. Coming in number 42 is A Song for Arbonne. A Song for Arbonne by Guy Gavriel Kay. More Guy Gavriel Kay. This was interesting because this was the 6th Guy Gavriel Kay book I read. I'd read Tigana first, and then Lions, and then Fionavar. And this was the first historical book I'd read that I had barely heard anything about. And I didn't really know what to expect, because I love Tigana and Lions, which were his two most well-known works. And then, like, Fionavar was good, but distinctly worse. And I was like, I wonder how good this is going to be. And then, like, 20 pages in, I was like, or even less, like 10 pages in, I was like, oh, it's so much better than Fiona Bar. It's like, it's obvious how much better it is than Fiona Bar. It's wild. It might be the most, like, consistent Guy Gavriel K book. A lot of Guy Gavriel K books have, like, genius, still very good, but clearly worse, genius. This one is, like, really, really good, better, and it just keeps getting better. It's actually some people's favorite Guy Gavriel K novel. It's not mine. Part of the reason is it has, like, a lot of troubadours and songs, and I just don't, the songs just don't hit for me. Like, I just don't care about them. But that being said, I still obviously love it, hence the 9.4 out of 10, and it being in my top 45 novels ever. Number 41 is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. This, I slept worse because I was reading this novel and I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's hard to talk about this novel without spoiling it, because it starts off with a premise that, like, oh, this is cool, and then about halfway in, you learn kind of what's going on, and things change about it. I think, like, this is the novel that made me very confident that M.L. Wong is an auto-buy author for me. She had already written a brilliantly written protagonist in Mizaki, and she did it again here with Siona, and they're very different, but they're both very competent and very flawed, but have me rooting for them despite their flaws. Like, they are both quite flawed. Like, Siona especially is extremely flawed, but I'm fully in the corner of what she is trying to do, despite her gaffes. And, like, this was one of those, it managed to combine at the same time a book that was, like, addicting and also one that lived in my head in the minutes that I was not reading it. And I think M.L. Wong actually has a case for being, like, one of the best character writers in the genre. Like, I think she's a case for the 5th best character writer, like, sci-fi or fantasy writer that I've read. She's so unflinching. Like, she doesn't pull any punches. She really forces you to confront who the characters are, and doesn't hide any of the characters from you, and it leads to such impactful novels. So there's a couple series that there just hasn't been anything from, and you might have been wondering, like, hey, where are these? Well, this might answer it. So I have, as number 40, I have The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I have it as one book. If I had to split them, Return of the King would be higher than 40 by a reasonably substantial margin. All 3 would be on the list for sure. I would go Return of the King, reasonably large gap, Fellowship, small gap, Two Towers. I just did audio for Two Towers. I mean, it's Lord of the Rings. It is some of the best world building and storytelling that we have ever seen. I can't believe the first time I read it, I didn't appreciate Frodo as much as I should. I don't know. How much do I have to talk about this? It's Lord of the Bloody Rings. It's like, it's so much greater than the sum of its parts. It's like, every time I read that, all the pieces of the story work so well together. And it has become iconic, and it is past the test of time. Time is the hardest test for a novel to survive, and Lord of the Rings has survived that test better than every single book above it, and likely will survive that test better than every single book in this entire top 150. But it's not quite my favorite. It's my 40th favorite. Anyway, number 39 is Wall of Storms by Ken Liu, which is the second novel in the Dandelion Dynasty. This is the Dandelion book that is the peak of insanity. The first, like, half of this book has a lot of, like, really well-written characters, really fantastic political maneuvering and scheming, and then there's, like, this scheme going on, and then this big shake-up at the halfway point that changes the entire trajectory of the novel and just takes it into, like, complete insanity in a way that is brilliant. Extremely well-rounded series, much more stylistically typical than Grace of Kings for what we get from a fantasy novel, but still quite sweeping. It's got stories within stories. It's got fantastic line-by-line writing, very efficient characterization, and it got up here reasonably comfortably. And then beating it by one spot is a book that I believe I read in the same month, which was the best reading month of my entire life. I think it was October of 2022. where I read Wall of Storms, and I also read Soldiers Live by Glenn Cook. And I was like, wow, I read both of these in the same month, which I like ever so slightly more. This is the final novel of The Black Company by Glenn Cook. It is everything I could have hoped for in a final novel of a series. The amount of emotional payoff is wild. The narration and writing and character writing and battle is incredible. It's thrilling. It's one of the best final scenes that I've ever read, and it's got the best catchphrase that anyone has ever written. Soldiers live and wonder why. The other series that you have not seen any of on this list is the Stormlight Archive, which you might notice that my YouTube icon is of a character from the Stormlight Archive. And that is just because all 5 are above this point. Yeah, they're all in the top 37. And my least favorite of the 5 is Oathbringer. Barely. Oathbringer is in contention for the best Sanderlanche and the best final act. It's one of the like, if you told me, yeah, Oathbringer is my favorite final act of any novel ever, I would be like, that's not insane. It might have my favorite single moment in the entire series. The reason it's my least favorite of the 5 comes down to very simply, I think it's my least favorite Kaladin book of the 5, reasonably comfortably, and it's my least favorite Shallan book of the 5, reasonably comfortably. It is the best Dalinar book, which it has in its favor. It also, compared to the first 2, I think is even better at fleshing out like the supporting cast and like characters who have played a much smaller role, and deepens the bullpen of the Stormlight Archive to a pretty large degree, which is why, you know, it's 37. Number 36. This is a novel I am so addicted by that when I listened to it on audio on my reread earlier this year, I listen to audio at work. That's the only time I listen to audiobooks, is in the back. There's a task I can do at work where I can also listen to the audiobook that takes up quite a bit of time. And I started on like a Friday, maybe Thursday, I think Friday, and I listened to a large portion of the novel in one day. And then the weekend happened, and over the weekend, I was really excited to get back to work so I could listen to The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter again. I will never, in my life, get tired of greater nobles being surprised by how badly they got their ass kicked by Tau. Like, I could just read that. You can just write a bunch of short stories if you want, Evan, and they're just all that every time, and I'll enjoy it every single time. So, breaking in the top 35 that I alluded to 11 spots ago is Knife of Dreams by Robert Jordan. This is going to be the highest only written by Robert Jordan book on this list. There's one more that was co-written. Knife of Dreams, I think, has an excellent case for being the best-paced Wheel of Time novel. Like I wrote in my original review for this, usually Wheel of Time is a series characterized by extremely high highs, but almost all of the Robert Jordan books have at least a couple chapters that you're just kind of like, whatever. The first time I read this, and I've only read it once, I thought all 39 chapters were distinctly excellent, and that it was one of the best-paced Robert Jordan book. I also think it has some of the best character work in any of Robert Jordan's novel, with one of the defining moments for one of its main characters, and truly it also has the best plot line of most people's least favorite character of the main 6. One of the best individual chapters for another one of the more controversial characters. Not a ton of content from my favorite character in the series, but what we get is brilliant. And then it is my favorite book in the series for my second favorite character. Wow, that was a word sandwich because I don't want to spoil who's alive. And also it has 2 like one-off POVs that are legitimately some of the best moments in the entire series. The Golden Crane flies for Tarmon Gaidon. Let's go. Number 34. This is our top 9.4 out of 10, and it is Under Heaven by Guy Gavriel Kay. I feel like we are starting to get really, really high on here. I mean, next is the 9.5s, which I have listed as among my favorite books of all time. So this was my favorite book that I guess isn't among my favorite books of all time. So that means I have 33 books among my favorite books of all time. Go figure. Under Heaven has one of the best first chapters of any of Guy Gavriel Kay's novel. It's got some of the best settings of Guy Gavriel Kay's novel. It's got some of the best minor characters of any of Guy Gavriel Kay's novel. The writing, the political schemey dialogue. It's delicious. I mean, the main reason it's... I mean, it doesn't really have a good reason not to be higher. It's pretty much good at everything. I guess it's not quite as thrilling in terms of plot as some of the Guy Gavriel K books I have ahead of it. But it's really, really, really excellent. Everything at this point is really, really, really excellent, including number 33 that I do not own physically, Memory, by Lois McMaster Bujold, which is the last book in Vorkoskin that I have personally read to this point. And this is the first book that is a 9.5 out of 10, which means this is among my favorite books of all time. This is not an ending, but it did wrap up to such a good point that I felt okay taking a break. This is one of those books where it feels very quiet, but like the plotting is so insanely meticulous when it comes to attention to detail. The character writing from Miles, the consequences from the previous things that have been going on, the payoff. There are moments that are just like recognition that is so immensely satisfying. It's so good. Speaking of another book that's so good, we have 32 Skin Game by Jim Butcher. This is my third favorite novel in the Dresden Files. This is, the only two I have above it are like the crazy outlier ones where insane things happen. This is essentially a normal case book. It just, in my opinion, does it better than all the other case books. A chapter in the middle of this is like my second favorite chapter in the entire Dresden Files, maybe my third favorite. It's so good, man. It just, like, the book has such insane highs and essentially non-existent lows. So that's how it gets up here and gets us to number 31. There are 3 of the sub-series written by Robin Hobb. Live Ship Traders, Tawny Man Trilogy, and Fits of the Fool Trilogy. And you might have noticed up until this point, we've not seen a single book from any of those trilogies. That's 9 books. And they're all in the top 31. And number 31 is The Golden Fool by Robin Hobb, which of those 9 books is my least favorite. But that is not because The Golden Fool is not completely brilliant in terms of character work. Now, this book does have middle book syndrome, which is why I like it less than Fool's Errand and Fool's Fate. But you will see how high up I have Fool's Fate and Fool's Errand. As a hint, they both only have 1 digit. So, like, when you drop down from that, it's not that big of a deal. Fitz is the best written character I've ever read. And, like, I can't emphasize how much he separated from the pack, and this is the series where he started separating himself from the pack. I really like Fitz after Farseer. After Farseer and Live Ship, Fitz was like my 10th favorite Realm of the Elderlings character. And then after Fool's Errand, I was like, oh, he's going to be my favorite character of all time. And this brought him along on this path. And Kedrigan, oh my god, there's a scene with her that's so good. Tawny Man Trilogy, man. Yeah. So, that's book number 30. Okay, number 30. We have the final appearance of this author, who's one of the authors who's appeared the most times on this list so far, and that is Toll the Hounds by Steven Erikson. The atmosphere and writing of this novel just felt different to me than the other novels in the series. Obviously, it has, like, the completely insane ending. I compared, like, the way this novel felt to read. Like, I remember Memories of Ice, like, a guitar solo just goes hard the entire time, while this, like, just slowly builds, gaining speed until you get this absolutely glorious crescendo, and some of the most, like, emotionally impactful moments of the entire series. The amount of just, like, paragraphs that you can just immerse yourself in and are just, like, delicious is just, So that is my favorite novel in Malazan, Book of the Fallen. Number 29 is Demon in White. This is, again, going to be the last appearance of an author that has appeared quite a time. Demon in White is my favorite novel by Christopher Rocchio, and it really just has everything I could want for the Sun Eater. People have joked that it's basically 6 books in one, and all 6 of it's kind of true, and it's like 6 really fire books in one. This is the book that really cemented Hadrian as one of my favorite protagonists. It cemented the world as one of my favorite worlds. It's got amazing political scheming, amazing revelations. It's the great combination of, like, superficially epic and cool while also being deep and exploring a bunch of topics really interestingly. In number 27, we have Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, which is my 4th favorite novel in the Stormlight Archive, and yes, is number 27. I reread this before Wind and Truth, and this was one where I was thinking it was possible that I would reread it and quite like it less than the others, partially just because of, like, that's what the outside perception does not seem to be that it's as good as I think it is. But this book rips. It's got so much good stuff. It's got unbelievably good Kaladin plot. It's got so much stuff that's absolutely crazy. And yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Stormlight fan, so it's probably not that big of a surprise to see my fourth favorite Stormlight novel that high up. That being said, I actually skipped a book because I wasn't reading. Rhythm of War was number 27. Number 28 is Mirror Dance by Louis McMaster Bujold, which is the last you will hear of Louis McMaster Bujold. That's 3 authors that have both appeared quite a while, and this is my favorite novel I have read so far by Louis McMaster Bujold. It's about double the length of the other Vorkoskin novels, and I'm not going to explain why. You'll have to get here. This is a novel that changed the way I look at how my circumstances have changed who I am as a person. There's an answer. Louis Bujold answered a question on Goodreads recently. Apparently, there was like an academic article written about some of the character work in that, like one of the characters in this. That's how good it was. For like the psychological issue they have. It also is just thrilling and impactful. So yeah, it's my favorite novel in the Vorkoskin saga. And number 26 is Memory and Dream by Charles DeLint. This is the first and last time you will see Charles DeLint on this, because this is the only book by Charles DeLint that I have ever read. And it captured me immediately. Like, it opens with a description of a piece of artwork, and I was like, damn. And then 3 pages in, this is one of those I remember because I was reading it based basically on the recommendation of one person. And there's always the concern that you're going to dislike something when you're reading it by one person. And I was expecting it to be like pretty good. And then like 2 chapters in, I was like, oh my God, this is like the best start I've ever had to an author. It's crazy. I think I do like the first part of this book more than I like the second half. But also I found the ending to be thrilling and just like emotionally like was so invested in it. I think it has so many moments that just feel like relatable from being relatable to the human experience, not because relatable because I'm necessarily similar to that character. And all that leaves is the top 25. We are going to have a lot of repeat authors for the top 25. Let me know in the comments how many of the top 25 you think will be written by Robin Hobb, and how many different authors do you think will be in it.